Hi, I'm Jeff Garnetti here with
Henry Dellifer.
How old were you in 1969?
34.
What is your present occupation?
Looking back at a very long and enjoyable life. I'm retired now.
Where were you when you watched Neil Armstrong take mankind's first step on the moon?
I was at home watching it on TV.
Why were you watching on TV?
Because the company I work for and my engineering group was involved in developing equipment for training and of the astronauts for that landing, and also for display systems used in the tracking system for Apollo.
Sounds like fun.
Oh, believe me, it was.
What was it like to witness this event?
I think it's probably one of the greatest experiences that I've had.
Why would you say that?
Well, you stop and think about where he was. You don't just grab a cab. The United States was able to put not only men in space, to take them to the moon, put them there safely, track their visit to the moon, and then bring them back. And we never lost anybody in the flights.
True. Not only did you what you think, but what also did you feel about this? What were your thoughts and feelings about spending people? Like, were you sprayed that someone might die? Like...
Well, of course, you can't be certain they won't. The whole thing that was behind all of the design and development in the program was to make sure that we anticipated everything that could happen and had an answer for it if it did. And the idea was to try to keep, make the mission successful and keep everybody alive. Even on Apollo 13, something happened that specifically hadn't been part of the testing. Enough other elements of testing allowed them to make changes, corrections, and so forth to the operation and come back alive.
Nice.
It's like when you learn to fly a plane. 95% of the time they teach you what to do if something goes wrong. The other 5% is fine. Same thing with the space program.
What were your hopes about this event?
That it would lead to many more.
If you could be an astronaut at that time, if you were like in Neil Armstrong's shoes, would you do it? And why?
Absolutely.
Why?
It was there. It was something different. It was a challenge. And if I could have qualified, I would have been very happy to have been an astronaut and to go to the moon. I would now too. That hasn't changed.
I would say it'd probably be pretty cool experience in no gravity for the first time and not even expecting that to not be there.
Well, again, part of their training is in low gravity. There were techniques to develop it for short periods of time, so they got the feel and knew how to handle themselves in low gravity. But to be on the surface of something, walking around with low gravity, has to be one of the ultimate feelings of, a combination, I guess, of power and joy at the same time. You can leap 5 feet in the air, but you got to make sure you come down with the right end down.
So do you know what they were doing on the moon?
Well, mostly gathering information about the moon, about the moon's lack of atmosphere, about the materials. Subsequent trips, they put out, the various landings on the moon put out different instruments for measurements, temperature, vibration, shock, when something hit it, or to determine if there's any internal earthquake type thing. So most of it was scientific, to gather information about the moon. We even took seeds from plants and trees up and exposed them to low gravity on the moon and brought them back. And Holliston has one of those trees, grown from a seed that went to the moon. It's right next to the police station.
That's pretty cool. Now, I heard you had something to do with the space race. More specific, the launch of Apollo 11. Is that true?
Well, not exactly the launch itself. In the case of that program, the company I was with, which is a Framingham computer company, 3C, I was part of the engineering team that worked on computers and interfaces for simulators used to train the astronauts for the command module and for the lunar lander. We also developed computer elements for displays that were used in the tracking system. So that was the direct application. Our company, although I didn't work on them, also produced some instrumentation in unmanned, previous unmanned flights, both to the moon and into outer space. So that we had some involvement prior to it. And with another company, I was involved in telemetry and instrumentation system for Mercury and Gemini. Capsule equipment and ground equipment. A lot of telemetry equipment. First direct contact with the space race was on the day that Russia launched Sputnik. Myself and a couple of other engineers from the firm we were with were installing a system that we designed that would take the telemetry information. This is data that's transmitted back from things that are being tested, translate it into something that means something, record it so it could be processed on computers, because this work was already going on. And we were installing this system down at General Electric Space Division in Philadelphia when we got the word that the Russians had launched a satellite into orbit. So they had tracking facilities at this place. So they had guys manning radio receivers trying to find the signals from it. And were able to receive the radio signals from Sputnik and determine that there was no data in them. There was no information. They were just tracking signals. So that was the first direct contact where we were investigating Russia's first satellite.
Now, can you tell us a little bit about anything, you know, like pretty cool facts? Any cool facts about the Apollo 11 space race, anything in general about that idea?
Well, interestingly enough, in 1958 I was working down at Huntsville, Alabama, the Army Ballistic Missile Agency. Part of that operation was run by Dr. Werner von Braun, who was a German rocket scientist, came here after the war. And he was developing rockets for the Army, rockets, engines, so forth. And while I was working there, one of his team took me in and showed me a 30-foot model of what was to be the Saturn V in the mid-60s. And this was 1958. At this time, NASA hadn't formally even been formed. NASA wasn't formed until the end of 58, the beginning of 59 rather. And already, Werner von Braun and his people were looking at what it would take to get to the moon. Yet we didn't have much more than a dozen unmanned satellites in orbit. We certainly hadn't put a man into orbit at that point. As a matter of fact, one of his short-term Army rockets was used to put our first satellites into orbit, and also put our first astronaut into suborbital flight on one of them. I don't know if anybody would be interested, but at that time there was a lot of political conflict between the Army and the Air Force. The Air Force was responsible for long-range missiles, and the Army was limited to short-range tactical missiles, say 100 miles. And every time Von Braun would test a new design that would go a couple of thousand miles, the